Rhetorical Quest.
Today, we're going to talk about communication and listening. Today, we're going to talk about communication and listening. So what is listening? Personally, I like to define listening as hearing with intention. We hear things all the time. Sounds hit our eardrums, and we don't even know what we're hearing at a particular time. But listening is when we're intentionally paying attention to something that we're hearing. And a lot of our listening is mindless listening. And we think about that as kind of a bad thing, and it can be when we need somebody to have a more mindful kind of listening. But, if you're just chatting with friends, you don't need to be comprehending and dealing with absolutely everything. You can just kind of listen and listen well enough to respond, listen well enough to take things into consideration, listen well enough so that if something comes into the conversation, you can go ahead and make a more mindful type of listening. Mindful listening is a more direct kind of listening. It's something where we're actually hoping to get something out of listening more than just a connection like we're here or something like that. Part of being a more mindful listener is taking part, an active part in the listening. So proper responses when you're engaged in listening, you could prompt. They say something, and then what happened? Yeah? Oh. You can question, what was that about? Why do you think that happened? Right? That's good listening. You can paraphrase, which is to say back to the person what they said, but in very different words than what they used. And that helps you make sure that you understand what they said, because they'll be like, no, that's not, I didn't mean that. You can support, just kind of help the person with your listening. You can analyze, take what they're listening and try and get to the bottom of whatever their problem is. You could advise. Some people you advise and you want to give them help with their issues, or you can judge. And we might say, well, judging is bad, right? Judge not, lest you be judged. But sometimes we come to people and we talk to them because we want judgment. Was I wrong here? Well, yeah, you were. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to need to rethink that. I think it was when I was using Sarah Trenholm's book, Thinking Through Communication, to teach a class, that I started to look really into what she was saying about ways we could improve listening. And she gave a few ways that no matter what kind of listening we're doing, we can always improve it. And one of those ways is to actually pay attention, right? If we improve our attention, we will improve our listening. If we focus on somebody when they're talking instead of having other things going on. She also said that we can improve our listening by improving retention. And a huge part of improving retention, remembering things, is using some kind of note taking, right? You could literally take notes. My grandpa on my mother's side always kept a notebook in his pocket. And he would pull that out and write the stuff down all the time. And I don't know how much he actually went back and referred to those notes, but he would just do that. You'd be talking to him and he'd pull that out, write it down, put it back in his pocket, and it wasn't even a problem. Most of us don't do that now, but most of us do carry a note-taking device. Maybe you could be talking about a concert or something you want to go to. Well, pull out your phone and look at the date, right? And go ahead and make a date. Concert, ? Something like that, while you're doing it, so that you can improve your retention by using the outside helps that allow you to improve retention. You can also improve listening by improving comprehension. Improving comprehension is going back and looking at what somebody was telling you before and making sure that you understand it before. Or even better, this is even better if you want to improve comprehension. If you know you're going to be talking about something, do a little research on it before you even go. I remember when I first started going to plays, And it wasn't very long before I realized that when I was going to plays that used, an older type of English, like an Elizabethan English or a Edwardian English, that sometimes to read a little bit about it before I went into it would help me pay attention and help me comprehend what was going on. It was so much better. That same kind of idea is good throughout. So you know that you're going into a situation where somebody's going to be talking about something. Read it. If you read the textbook before you came and listened to this video, you're probably getting a whole lot more out of it than people who are hearing the video and they want to go back and read some of the texts. A final way you can improve listening is to improve toleration. Sometimes we get our emotions all up about something and we stop listening to the other person. We're not paying attention to what they're saying. We're just paying attention to what we felt, and we feel strongly, right? And when that happens, listening falls down. Now, Trenholm actually said improving tolerance, but all the others ones of these end with shun. So I wanted to end it with shun too. So toleration. I have this quote from Stephen Fry up there that he gave during the conference on blasphemy. He says, "It is now very common to hear people say, 'I'm rather offended by that,' as if that gives them a certain rights. It's actually nothing more. It's simply a whine. It's no more than a whine. I find that offensive. It has no meaning. It has no purpose. It has no reason to be respected as a phrase. I'm offended by that. Well, so what?" Um, you're being offended by what somebody said, or you being upset by it, or you thinking that somehow this is an unjust way of talking or something like that, doesn't help you come to any kind of shared understanding, any kind of mutuality. It doesn't improve your relationship. Now, it doesn't mean you have to tolerance or toleration. Tolerance is not acceptance, right? I don't have to accept everything somebody says. That's not sensible. People lie to me. Sometimes people tell the truth to me, and they're telling the truth, but they've gotten some facts confused and they're just wrong. In those cases, I don't have to accept what they say, but I do need to tolerate what they're saying and not let it get to me. So those are ways that we can improve our listening. But sometimes we'd like to improve the listening of our partners, right? Sometimes we'd like to improve theirs. And you don't get that by saying, you need to listen, or you don't listen, or I don't feel like you're listening to me. And none of that really helps, right? So instead, what we want to do is become a safe person to listen to. I did some research on listening a while ago, published an article. And this is one of the things that, as I was looking through the literature, I found to be a really, it's kind of a brushed over, but when people pay attention to it, it helps listening so much. And that is being a safe person to listen to. So we want to talk a little bit about how to do that. The biggest takeaway from the article that I wrote on listening a few years ago was that listening goes better if, when you're talking to your partner, you explicitly tell them what kind of listening you want. Are you wanting empathetic listening? Are you wanting appreciative listening? Are you wanting critical listening? All of these are valid reasons to listen. Empathetic listening is just listening, to kind of share feelings with somebody. Appreciative listening is to understand and enjoy even their presence and their conversation and get more stuff out of it. Critical listening is listening to actually solve a problem. And the biggest problems, of course, come when we engage in critical listening, but our partner wants empathetic listening, right? And we didn't realize that. They came to us with a problem and we're like, okay, here's how you solve the problem. They get all upset, right? Because they wanted empathetic listening and we gave critical. But any of these can get confused. Sometimes, for me, I've gone to people, I've talked to them about my problems, and they're just like, oh man, I feel for you. And I'm like, yeah, but I wanted some advice here. You also have to actually let your partner listen. You have to be a type of person who lets them listen. So we gave all those listening responses before, but what if you don't let your partner comprehend, retain things, because you don't let them mark this down, do something to help them remember what you said, that you feel like they're no longer paying attention to you because they're trying to make sure they remember what you said. If you're the type of person who gets upset when your partner asks questions about what you just said, you are not a safe person to whom to be listened. You are not a safe person for them to listen to, because listening means asking questions, right? It means trying to figure out what's going on. And part of that is to misinterpret. Really, that's paraphrase, right? But anytime somebody says things in different words, which is a paraphrase, it's going to be certain amount of misrepresentation in that. And if you're married to the exact words you said, rather than the meaning that your partner takes away from the words, you are not a safe person to whom to listen. And you need to make adjustments and say, okay, no, that's not what I mean. Don't get angry because they misinterpreted. That's not their fault. That's part of living in a symbolic world and being part of a language community. You're going to misinterpret each other. That's not a problem. The problem is when people get upset at being misinterpreted. So if you want your partner to listen to you, you've got to be a safe person to listen. And that means letting them take notes, letting them ask questions, letting them misinterpret. And you don't just let them live with the misinterpretation. You tell them, no, that's not what I meant. You explain it, but you have to be able to let them do that, because if they're afraid, if I don't give this back to them in the exact same words, or if I don't understand everything, they're going to get so angry. You're just not a safe person to whom to listen. And you need to choose a proper time and place. Sometimes we complain about somebody not listening to us, when the truth is we went and talked to them in a situation where they were less likely to listen to what we said. They were watching TV, they were playing a game, they were reading a book, and we come in and interrupt them. Well, that's probably not the right time. Now, sometimes we have to do that because we just don't have any other connection with that person at any other time. But honestly, the best thing to do in that situation is say, I have a few things I need us to talk about. When can we do that? How much longer is your show? Can we talk after it's over? That way they're not doing something at the time of listening. And if you do that, if you make sure they're in a position to listen to you, then you are a much safer person to whom to listen. And the final thing I'd want to say for making sure people are safe to listen to you is, if you want people to listen, you need to try and stay on topic. If you go from one thing to another thing to another thing, they aren't going to know which of those things was the thing that they were supposed to attend to, comprehend, stuff like that. And that's not the fault of the person who didn't comprehend or understand or anything like that. So now I'd really like to hear from you. And what I'd be especially interested in is, after you've studied and looked into listening a little bit, what are some things that you do to make yourself somebody more worth listening to by others, right? And so I'd like to hear from that. If you're one of my students, write about that in the discussion prompt that will be below. But if you're just somebody listening on YouTube, I would love it if you would put it in the comments so that we can have a conversation and maybe all become better listeners.